If a writer of prose knows enough of what he is writing about, he may omit things that he knows, and the reader, if the writer is writing truly enough, will have a feeling of those things as strongly as though the writer had stated them. The dignity of movement of an iceberg is due to only 1/8 of it being above water. A writer who omits things because he does not know them only makes hollow places in his writing. Ernest Hemingway, in Death in the Afternoon. Ernest Hemingway was one of the most influential writers of the 20th century due to the revolutionary style of writing that he coined, the Iceberg Theory. The Iceberg Theory is a literary technique where the themes of the novel lie deep below the surface of the minimalist writing. With beginnings as a newspaper writer, he learned to fit a lot of meaning into the fewest amount of words. Hemingway developed a highly intellectual yet minimalist style of writing. Hemingway's true genius was recognizing how to use this form of writing as a way to show how men who fought in World War I refused to talk about their post-war anxiety. The World War I veteran, Ernest Hemingway, explores nature, masculinity, and love with his minimalist rhetoric that begs the reader to explore between the lines and discover what he hid below the tip of the iceberg. In his novel, The Sun Also Rises, Hemingway puts his iceberg theory to work with a conversation between the protagonist and one of his best friends. The scene entails an extremely simple conversation on the surface between two men fishing, a classically masculine activity, as Bill tries to show how much he cares about his friend Jake by trying to ask hard questions without overstepping his bounds.
Say, what about this Brett business?
What about it?
Were you ever in love with her?
Sure.
For how long?
Off and on for a hell of a long time.
Oh, hell. Sorry, fella.
It's alright. I don't give a damn anymore.
Really?
Really. Only had a hell of a lot rather not talk about it.
You aren't sorry I asked you?
Why the hell should I be?
I'm going to sleep. Hey, listen, Jake. Are you really a Catholic?
Technically.
What does that mean?
I don't know.
All right. I'll go to sleep now. Don't keep me awake by talking so much.
Hemingway touches on the themes of nature, heterosexual interest, and masculine platonic love, all in the space of less than a page. Hemingway shows the nature of men as they try to express care for one another without responding to the tough questions that one friend can pose to another. Bill brings up Jake's love interest as well as his religious background, and Jake brushes off both questions, pretending that both of these topics are unimportant to him, when in reality, these two themes lie at the heart of the importance of the entire novel itself. The story Big Two-Hearted River by Ernest Hemingway also uses masculine nature as well as wilderness themes. The protagonist, Nick, feels guilt through his survival after the end of the First World War. Hemingway uses more simplistic writing through describing how Nick desires to always be working to get his mind off his guilt as well as give himself purpose in the world. Nick cannot be happy until the end of the day when he finishes his subsistence fishing.
Nick was happy as he crawled inside the tent. He had not been unhappy all day. This was different though. Now things were done. There had been this to do. Now it was done. It had been a hard trip. He was very tired. That was done. He had made his camp. He was settled. Nothing could touch him. It was a good place to camp. He was there, in the good place. He was in his home where he had made it. Now, he was hungry.
Ernest Hemingway, Big Two-Hearted River. Nick's guilt and feeling of impotence drives him to live a Spartan lifestyle, which is mirrored by Hemingway's simplistic writing as Nick escapes his tainted everyday life. He seeks inner peace through living with nature and completing simple masculine tasks that keep his mind and body occupied. It becomes incumbent on the reader to actively pick up on the nature of Nick's inner feelings, since 7/8 of the true meaning of the story lie in between Hemingway's words. Some people mistook Hemingway's minimalist writing for simplicity. William Faulkner once said, quote, "Hemingway, he has no courage, has never crawled out on a limb. He has never been known to use a word that might cause the reader to check with a dictionary to see if it is properly used." What Faulkner saw as a weakness, Hemingway used as a strength for compelling rhetoric. Hemingway used the Iceberg Theory as a therapeutic way to deal with his own stress about the war he fought in. The main themes of masculinity, love, and nature were all extremely prevalent in Hemingway's life. It can be understood that Hemingway's own inability to talk about his post-war stress is shown in the stoic characters that he created. More often than not, Hemingway's fictions seem rooted in his journeys into himself much more clearly and obsessively than is usually the case with major fiction writers. His writing was his way of approaching his identity, of discovering himself in the projected metaphors of his experience. He believed that if he could see himself clear and whole, his vision might be useful to others who also lived in this world. Quote, Earl Rovit. The Iceberg Theory was not only a technique, but a weapon used to combat deep male anxiety felt by Hemingway as a result of the Great War. Hemingway's anxiety from World War I can be seen through the protagonist, Frederick Henry, in his best-selling novel, A Farewell to Arms. Henry is an ambulance driver in the war, holding the same position that Hemingway himself occupied, and calmly describes how his unit is bombed with shells in Italy during the First World War, an experience Hemingway had himself. Hemingway's anxiety is not shown through almost any first-hand accounts, but rather through his characters that exhibited his Iceberg Theory. The Iceberg Theory helped countless people who suffered in a similar way to Hemingway, who had an inability to speak about their own issues. The legacy of Hemingway's writing lies in how he was able to get to the root of internal male anxiety after one of the largest atrocities of the 20th century. Hemingway was able to tap into the forbidden part of male sensitivity. He gave a voice and an outlet to traumatized men in a time when they felt silenced by their own neuroses. In a world of pain and failure, the individual also has his own weapon to assert the dignity of his existence. Charles Child Walcott has observed that, quote, "the conflict between the individual needs and social demands is matched by the contest between feeling man and unfeeling universe, and between the spirit of the individual and his biological limitations." Ernest Hemingway discovered a new way to write for a silent generation. His true success lies in how he wrote about companionship and positive themes, as well as forbidden depressing topics in his simple manner. Ernest Hemingway reflected on his own writing in his Pulitzer Prize acceptance speech. Quote, "No good book has ever been written that has in it symbols arrived at beforehand and stuck in. That kind of symbol sticks out like raisins in raisin bread. Raisin bread is all right, but plain bread is better. I tried to make a real old man, a real boy, a real sea, a real fish, and real sharks. But if I made them good and true enough, they would mean many things. The hardest thing is to make something really true and sometimes truer than true."